Bullies need the new black girl in the face, big mistake. They didn't know who she really was. It all started on an ordinary fall morning. Buses lined the schoolyard, laughter echoing between the yellow walls, and leaves crunching beneath hundreds of shoes. No one paid much attention to the quiet black girl stepping off the bus. She carried nothing flashy, just a worn backpack and eyes that had seen more than anyone could imagine. But within hours, she'd become the center of attention. And cruelty. By the end of the day, her name would be whispered through every hallway, and the bullies who mocked her would be trembling. Because when they hit her, they didn't know who she really was, and what she did next would change that school forever. What happens when the weakest-looking person turns out to be the most powerful one in the room? The morning sun spilled over the quiet suburban streets of Brookdale High, painting the school courtyard in a golden haze. The air buzzed faintly with laughter, sneakers against pavement, the faint sound of lockers clanging. It was a typical Tuesday, except for one unfamiliar figure standing at the edge of the crowd. Her name was Aaliyah Carter, a 17-year-old girl with eyes that carried stories far beyond her age. Her posture was straight, composed, not timid but disciplined, the kind of stillness that wasn't born from fear, but from control. She had recently moved here from Atlanta, a quiet transfer student whose arrival barely made a ripple in the chatter of teenagers too caught up in their own worlds. Yet, Aaliyah was no ordinary girl. Only weeks ago, she had stood on an international stage representing her country, the youngest black female martial artist to win a national gold medal. But she didn't tell anyone. Not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned long ago that power often draws envy before respect. At Brookdale, she wanted anonymity, a fresh start, just a quiet space to focus on school, blend in, and prepare for her next tournament. But life, especially for someone like her, rarely allowed peace for long. She walked through the crowded hallway, the whispers beginning almost immediately, some curious, others cruel. Aaliyah wasn't naive, she'd seen it before. The sidelong glances, the smirks, the unspoken words that hung like static in the air. She could almost predict which group would start at first, and she was right. By lunchtime, the cafeteria was alive with noise, the kind that fed off mockery. A group of seniors at the back corner had already taken notice of the new girl. Their leader, a tall, smug basketball player named Chase Miller, leaned back in his chair, watching Aaliyah walk by with that detached poise. He didn't like it. To him, confidence wasn't something a new black girl in his world was supposed to have. It started small. Muttered comments, laughter behind her back, deliberate shoulder bumps in the hallway. She ignored them all, her calm expression never breaking. But inside, each insult felt like a quiet storm she refused to release. Because she knew what losing control looked like. She'd seen it in training. Anger made fighters sloppy, desperate, and Aaliyah had promised herself never to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her crack. Yet every day, the tests grew harsher. Notes slipped into her locker with racial slurs. Her gym shoes stolen and thrown on the roof. Her name mispronounced deliberately by classmates who laughed when she corrected them. Still, she kept her silence. Every insult became another lesson in restraint. Every glare, another reason to sharpen her patience. But what no one knew was that every morning, before school, Aaliyah trained. At sunrise, when most were asleep, she stood barefoot in the small patch of grass behind her mother's apartment, moving with precision, a blur of discipline and grace. Those moments grounded her. They reminded her that true strength didn't need an audience. Still, the world inside Brookdale's walls grew colder. Even some teachers looked the other way when they saw the bullying. It wasn't new to Aaliyah. Racism, subtle and sharp, had shadowed her all her life. But here, it carried a cruel edge. And soon, it would boil over. The day it happened began like any other. Bright, ordinary, deceptively calm. The kind of day where no one expects to see violence unfold in a cafeteria full of students and phones ready to record. Aaliyah sat quietly, alone at her table, unbothered by the stares. But across the room, Chase whispered something to his friends, and the laughter that followed was loud enough for the entire room to hear. Everyone watched as he stood, swaggering toward her table, and though Aaliyah didn't flinch, her heart whispered one thing: not again. But fate and cruelty were already moving closer. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter, but there was something darker beneath the surface. The kind of silence that waits for chaos to begin. Chase Miller and his friends moved through the crowd like sharks scenting blood. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Aaliyah didn't look up when they approached. She simply continued eating her lunch, her movements calm, deliberate, like a soldier maintaining discipline under fire. "Hey," Chase sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. But Aaliyah stayed silent, her gaze steady on the untouched corner of her tray. The laughter from his table grew louder. Inside, Aaliyah could feel the room shift, that familiar energy she'd known since childhood, the kind of energy that told her when trouble was coming, when words were no longer words but daggers dressed in laughter. Every eye in the cafeteria turned toward her. And then, without warning, Chase flicked her milk carton off the table. It splattered across the floor, white streaks spreading like a silent explosion. His friends howled with laughter. Still, Aaliyah didn't move, because she remembered something her coach once told her. The moment you rise to their level, you hand them your power. But the crowd didn't see wisdom. They saw weakness. And weakness, in their world, was entertainment. For the next few days, things only got worse. Every hallway became a stage. Chase and his crew trailed her between classes, whispering slurs just low enough for teachers not to hear. When she walked home, she'd feel the crunch of gravel behind her, the sound of sneakers following a few steps too close. Yet every time, she stayed calm. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. But silence can only hold for so long before it becomes the spark of something far greater. One Friday afternoon, Brookdale High held its annual assembly. The gymnasium was packed. Students crammed into the bleachers, cheering as the principal rambled about school pride and teamwork. Aaliyah sat quietly in the back, her backpack clutched close, trying to blend into the noise. Then she heard her name. "Hey, it's the karate girl," someone yelled from the crowd. She froze, her eyes darted toward the sound. It was Chase again, holding up his phone, showing an image on the screen. Somehow he had found a photo of her from months earlier, taken at a martial arts competition. Her in a crisp white jai standing on the podium with a medal around her neck. Gasps rippled through the students. "She thinks she's some kind of fighter." Chase laughed, showing the photo around. "Guess what, little champion? You're in our ring now." A murmur swept through the gym. Some students laughed. Others watched quietly, uneasy. Aaliyah felt her heartbeat quicken. Not from fear, but from realization. Her secret was gone. Still, she said nothing. The bell rang, and the crowd spilled out into the hallways like a restless tide. Chase and his crew weren't done. They followed her out of the gym, down the steps, and into the open courtyard where sunlight cut sharp lines through the trees. That's when it happened. A shove, a jeer, a phone camera raised. The crowd circled instinctively, hungry for drama. Aaliyah stood in the center, surrounded by sneers and flashing lenses. Chase towered in front of her, his grin wide, his confidence louder than reason. He pushed her again. "Harder this time. Come on, champ," he taunted. "Show us what you got." Aaliyah's backpack slipped from her shoulder, hitting the ground with a dull thud. She looked at it for a long moment, her breath steady. Then she met his gaze. There was no fear in her eyes. No anger, just calm, and that scared him more than anything. The crowd's laughter turned to silence, the kind that prickles the back of your neck. But before anyone could react, Chase lunged forward, swinging his leg in a mocking karate kick. The crowd laughed again, until it didn't. His knee struck her face. Gasps echoed through the courtyard. The sound was sharp, final, like the crack of a snapped branch. Aaliyah stumbled, one hand pressed to her cheek. Blood streaked across her palm. The world tilted. The phone's recording caught every second, every cruel smile, every frozen face, but no one expected what came next. She straightened, slowly, not in rage, not in shock, but with a precision so deliberate, so measured, it froze Chase in place, because in that moment, the quiet new girl everyone thought they knew was gone. What stood there now was the champion no one believed existed. Every breath she took was calm. Every step she made was intentional. The world seemed to hold its breath as she raised her gaze, not at Chase, but through him. Then, it began, a single, fluid motion, her body twisting just enough to redirect his next shove. He stumbled forward, confused. Another motion, faster this time, a pivot, a sweep. He hit the ground before he understood how. The crowd gasped, but Aaliyah didn't press forward. She didn't strike again. She simply stepped back, eyes steady. The embodiment of restraint. That was her difference. She fought not to hurt, but to defend. The crowd didn't know what to do. Some laughed nervously, others whispered, and Chase, humiliated, bruised, breathless, scrambled to his feet, fury in his eyes. He lunged again, and this time, Aaliyah sidestepped effortlessly, guiding his momentum into the air. He fell harder, phones were recording, faces frozen. By now, teachers had started running from the building. The crowd scattered like leaves, voices shouting, "She attacked him!" "No, he hit her first!" Aaliyah stood still, chest rising and falling slowly, like the calm after a storm. But inside her, something broke. Not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Because she knew exactly what came next. The day of truth came like a storm in disguise. Calm skies above, quiet hallways below, and tension rippling through the walls of Brookdale High. The sunlight poured in through the gym's wide windows, casting golden stripes across the polished floor. It looked like any normal morning, but for Aaliyah Carter, it was the day everything would change. For weeks, she had endured whispers, laughter, and cruel jokes. The new girl, the black girl, the one who didn't belong. And at the heart of it all stood Chase Miller, the golden boy athlete with a perfect grin and a talent for turning cruelty into entertainment. He'd mocked her, tripped her, and once, in front of everyone, kneed her in the face during a practice drill, pretending it was an accident. That moment had haunted her, but she'd stayed silent, because she wasn't there to prove herself to them. She was there for something much bigger. When the PE teacher announced a school-wide self-defense exhibition, Aaliyah saw her moment, not to hurt Chase, but to reclaim what he'd tried to take from her, her dignity. The bleachers filled fast. Students lined the walls, phones ready. Even teachers watched with mild curiosity, unaware of the quiet fire burning inside the girl standing in the center of the floor. Calm, collected braided hair tied back neatly, eyes locked on the mat ahead. Chase swaggered in like he owned the place, slapping hands with his friends. "You ready, Carter?" he said loudly. "Try not to cry this time." Laughter erupted. Aaliyah didn't answer. She just adjusted her wristband, the same one she wore during every championship, and took her stance. The PE teacher called out, "All right, light demonstration only, no rough play." But Chase wasn't listening. He lunged forward instantly, trying to grab her shoulder. But in less than a heartbeat, Aaliyah pivoted, redirected his force, and swept his leg. He hit the mat with a thud. The room froze. Chase blinked, disoriented. His friends exchanged looks, unsure if they should laugh or gasp. He scrambled back up, embarrassed. Lucky move. He lunged again, faster this time. But Aaliyah sidestepped effortlessly, catching his momentum and using it against him. A precise motion, perfectly timed. Chase flipped over and landed hard on his back. This time, there was no laughter, only silence. A few phones lowered. The crowd leaned in. Something was shifting. Chase stood, panting now, pride burning in his eyes. He charged again, reckless and angry. Aaliyah didn't even blink. She dropped low, spun under his arm, and locked him in a clean shoulder hold. Within seconds, he was pinned. The teacher rushed forward, shouting, "That's enough!" But it was already over. Aaliyah released him gently and stepped back, bowing her head in quiet respect, the mark of a true martial artist. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She was calm, powerful, centered. Then a whisper broke the silence. "Wait, is that Aaliyah Carter?" Someone pulled up a clip on their phone. "Bro, she's the girl who won the National Youth Martial Arts Championship in Atlanta last month." "No way, she's literally famous." Gasps spread across the gym like wildfire. The same students who had laughed at her, mocked her, doubted her, now stared in disbelief. Chase's jaw clenched. His arrogance melted into humiliation. The teacher looked stunned. "You're that Aaliyah Carter?" She nodded once. "Yes, but I didn't come here to show off. I came here to learn, just like everyone else." The silence that followed was heavier than any punch. Every eye in that gym seemed to drop. Guilt, shame, realization. Aaliyah turned toward Chase, meeting his eyes for the first time without fear. "You looked at me," she said softly, "and all you saw was someone to put down. You never stopped to see who I really was." Chase opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. And then, unexpectedly, someone began to clap. It was the principal, who had been watching from the doorway. Then another teacher joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire gym erupted in applause. Not the kind meant for entertainment, but the kind that rises from respect. Aaliyah didn't smile. Because applause couldn't erase weeks of pain. It couldn't undo what was done, but it meant something. It meant she was seen. She bowed once more, graceful, calm, strong, and walked off the mat. By afternoon, a student had uploaded the video to social media. Within hours, it went viral. The title read, "Bullies need the new black girl in the face. Big mistake." They didn't know who she really was. News outlets picked it up. Comment sections flooded with praise. People across the country called her an inspiration. But for Aaliyah, the real victory wasn't online. It was the quiet strength she had reclaimed. The power of holding her ground with dignity when the world tried to break her. That evening, as the sunset spilled gold across her window, there was a soft knock on the door. Her mother answered. Standing outside was Chase, hoodie pulled up, hands shaking slightly. His voice was small. "I came to apologize," he said. "I didn't know who you were." Aaliyah looked at him, the same boy who had humiliated her, now barely able to hold her gaze. "That's the thing, Chase," she said quietly. "You shouldn't have needed to." He nodded, eyes down. "You're right." And then he left, walking away slowly, his arrogance stripped bare, replaced with the first glimpse of humility. Aaliyah turned back to the window, the orange sky reflecting in her eyes. The world outside hadn't changed overnight, but she had, and that was enough. The next morning, Brookdale High felt different. The usual chatter in the hallways was quieter, softer, almost reflective. Posters from the previous day's self-defense demo still hung on the bulletin board. But now, someone had scribbled below them in bold marker, "Respect has no color." Aaliyah Carter walked through those same halls, head high, steps calm and confident. For the first time since transferring, she didn't feel invisible. Not because she'd gone viral, but because people finally saw her for more than the color of her skin. Whispers followed her still, but they carried new weight. Admiration, curiosity, maybe even guilt. Some students nodded as she passed. Others offered quiet smiles, awkward, hesitant, but genuine. A few couldn't meet her eyes at all. Chase wasn't at school that day. Word was he'd asked for a few days off. Maybe he needed time to face what he'd done. Maybe he needed time to grow. Aaliyah didn't wish him ill. She just hoped he'd learned what respect really meant. Not fear, not reputation, but the simple act of recognizing another person's worth. That afternoon, as she trained alone in the school gym, sunlight cutting through the tall windows, she replayed everything in her mind. Every insult, every bruise, every stare. The humiliation that once felt heavy now seemed like fuel. She'd turned their cruelty into strength. And yet, deep inside, she knew her story wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about something bigger, a mirror held up to society itself. How many people are overlooked every day, judged for their color, their accent, their background, until one moment forces the world to see them for who they really are. Outside the gym, a soft knock echoed on the doorframe. It was the principal, holding a small envelope. "This came for you," he said with a smile. Inside was a letter from the National Youth Empowerment Foundation. They had seen her story online. The foundation wanted her to speak at their annual conference about resilience, racism, and inner strength. Aaliyah's hands trembled as she read the words. The same voice that had once been silenced would now be heard by thousands. She looked up, tears threatening to fall, but she caught herself. Not because she wanted to hide emotion, but because she wanted to own it. That evening, her mother hugged her tightly. "You didn't just defend yourself, baby," she whispered. "You reminded the world what power really looks like." Weeks passed. The viral video became a national conversation. News outlets debated it. Schools began reviewing their anti-bullying policies. And people online shared their own stories of prejudice and perseverance. In classrooms across the country, teachers played the clip and asked, "What would you have done differently?" And each time, Aaliyah's quiet courage reached new hearts. When she finally stepped on stage at the youth conference, dressed simply in white, the same wristband on her arm, the crowd fell silent before she even spoke. She looked out over hundreds of faces, young, old, every shade, every story, and then, with steady breath, she began. "People thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was less because of my color. But silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. And sometimes, the loudest lesson you can teach is the one that doesn't use words at all." The hall erupted in applause. But this time, she smiled, because now the applause meant something. It wasn't for revenge or viral fame, it was for change. As she left the stage, Aaliyah paused by a large window overlooking the city. The sunlight reflected in her eyes, just like that day in the gym. The same light that once witnessed her pain now shone on her victory. And somewhere out there, maybe Chase was watching. Maybe he'd learned. Maybe he was different now. Because sometimes, redemption doesn't need an audience. It just needs acknowledgement. Aaliyah Carter didn't just win a fight. She started a conversation. One that says power isn't about how loud you shout. It's about how strongly you stand when the world pushes you down. Watch our previous video for another powerful story of courage and change. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every click helps these stories reach the world and reminds someone out there that their voice matters too.